All right, hello and welcome back to the channel. This is another episode of Drive With Me, I think is the title or subtitle of the series that I'm liking the most. So today I actually wanted to go over artificial intelligence, or AI as it's commonly called, right? And it's had a pretty big impact on the 2020s in particular, right? It's really emerged as a consumer product, if you will, since roughly 2021, I think is when it really started splashing. That was when ChatGPT came out. And I want to preface this before getting too far into it that I am a therapist by trade. I am not an AI expert, and I don't claim to be. However, I have done a fair amount of watching interviews and reading articles, particularly of interviews from those who seem to be fairly well versed and often are claimed to be experts uh, in artificial intelligence and computing and computer science and programming in general. So, what's interesting is the concept of artificial intelligence has been around for a while. Obviously, I am aware of it at least as far back as my early childhood when they were talking about it in video games and the artificial intelligence of enemies and so on, especially as we were making the transition to 3D gaming. So in like the mid 90s with the original PlayStation, Sega Saturn, Nintendo 64, I had an N64. A lot of my friends had a PlayStation. I didn't even really remember that there was a Saturn until years later. But in any case, there was a lot of experimentation in those days, and one of the big topics that was just discussed fairly regularly was the artificial intelligence of like enemies and non-player characters or NPCs. And that conversation really continued through your Gen 6 consoles like the PS2 and its contemporaries and onward, right? And my understanding is that's a completely different subset, but it's forming the foundation of what I'll be getting at, right? So, video game artificial intelligence is not the same as ChatGPT, right? Well, fundamentally, what all artificial intelligence is it uses a binary system, right? So ones and zeros to form an incredibly complex, basically math equation known as an algorithm that involves a variety of inputs, right? To then glean the most likely correct solution based on those inputs. So it's like an if this and this and this and this, then this, right? Like if a kind of a math way to put it is like if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C kind of deal, right? Like I don't know, that's just the first thing that came to my head. But the point is that your basic math algorithms, that's fundamentally what a lot of this is based on. It's far longer and far more complex with far more variables. But we've been working on artificial intelligence and automated computing to various degrees for a long time. It's actually a lot of what programming has been, right? It's simply in the 2020s, it's gotten to the point that we can use these complex algorithms, very complex systems that have been built upon each other and layered on each other over the course of years and really decades of computer science work. And there's enough processing power, not just in individual computers, but in particular during the 2010s when there was this build out of cloud computing infrastructure that really, and then the internet, and particularly mobile internet, that gave us the capacity to process this stuff in a way that we never really had before. And so by the 2020s, you kind of see this cracking open of the shell of what the marketing term is artificial intelligence, and generative, as in it generates new things, artificial intelligence. In reality, it is the same conceptually as all other forms of more primitive computing algorithms before it. But it is getting better at looking like a human reaction, especially with things like ChatGPT, right? or even a lot of the video producing ones, right? Ones that produce a lot of this AI slop that you see on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube and so on, and a lot of it's even in ads, right? I've been watching a lot of gardening videos lately. It is that time of year, and my wife and I have been kind of setting that up, and it's been interesting. But a lot of the ads that come through show these like really abundant, garden spaces, and they're trying to sell you some product or another, and it shows you people moving in odd ways or putting their hands like deep into dirt that they shouldn't be able to, and all sorts of weird little AI isms, if you will, that start making it obvious. But my goodness, if those things weren't there, they look so good nowadays. So it's not that AI isn't real or that AI isn't good at what it does, but it is important to clearly differentiate what artificial intelligence, as we're calling it now, what it is and what it is not, right? Because it has been sold as this big next huge step that's going to absolutely change computing and the world. And more than likely, over time, it will change much of the world. However, it is still a tool, and it still functions like a tool, and it does not have the multi-layered, three-dimensional connections that, say, human neurons in the brain have, and so will likely never, at least not in its current state. Maybe with quantum computing, we could be talking about something else. Maybe when we start merging some of these other technologies together, maybe then we become a little bit more concerned or interested in what that means. But as of right now, we're seeing computing power and the gains that we saw in the 90s, the 20s, and even into the 2010s has slowed dramatically. And so what's ended up taking a lot of its place is this cloud computing. It's, well, then let's build out data centers. And that was going on long before that infrastructure was big and was booming as an industry, long before AI and this current boom really got started. AI is just kind of a continuation of that. And so that's what you see here is modern, what we're calling like consumer level artificial or even business level artificial intelligence is a combination of a variety of technologies that have come together and really were only possible on this kind of scale more recently because of the build out of so much cloud computing. Because even at the rate that we're developing personal computers and smartphones and so on, it's just too much, right? Like to get full, big, really efficient AI models, there is so much processing that's done, and there's so many variables that are being crunched to produce these likely answers that it's gotten a lot better over time. But fundamentally, it required more processing than what individual consumer devices can provide. So it's been important that it's been connected to the internet, and I'm sure over time you'll get better and better models that can be uploaded, or that have a lot of predefined answers or any number of things. There's probably a variety of tricks and things that can be done to make these models smaller and more efficient. And over time, you're like, you know what, it doesn't even need to process this anymore. We're just going to create a shortcut so it auto answers these kinds of questions like this. And historically, it's exactly what you see in computer science, is that the code, not necessarily perfectly, but generally speaking, becomes more efficient over time. And as you layer code on top of each other and systems on top of each other, it becomes better at talking to the other layer for you, like a layer below it, in a more simple to use manner. And AI is another step of that, as we know it today, right? As we're using it right now. And much like the dot-com bubble in the early 2000s, right? A lot of the things, the technologies like fiber optic cables and the internet and personalized computing and so on, and even the web, right? The World Wide Web. A lot of it really did end up transforming the world and fundamentally altered how business and personal communication was engaged in. However, it didn't do it overnight, and that was a lot of what caused the dot-com bubble to burst, and the bubble in the first place, was a lot of these technologies were expected to kind of change everything right now. And now 20, 30 years or 20 plus years on, now we've seen a lot more of those effects. I suspect that's what we're going to see with AI also, and I think that tech is in a more powerful position, and it will probably happen even faster than that initial internet boom, if you will, and personal computing boom, the way that took decades, this will probably, take 10 to 15 years tops to reach the same level of kind of market saturation, if that. However, I do think we're starting to see the limits of what modern artificial intelligence can actually do and what it means. And you're starting to see more and more experts talk about this. One, it needs to be regulated better as far as I'm concerned. And I think there are a number of Congress people, senators, and House members, like here in the United States, on both sides of the political aisle, that are rightfully concerned about what happens when you leave these big tech companies unregulated and they're able to just soak up huge amounts of data that's being generated on the internet and use it however they want with virtually no repercussions. There's some danger there, but I don't think it's the general artificial intelligence, the AGI, that a lot of us have been concerned about, that's going to, create Skynet and then Terminators, and we're all going to, be usurped in terms of authority and position in society by robotic artificial intelligence. That, I mean, it may happen eventually, who knows, but it's very unlikely to happen anytime soon, just based on the nature of our technology. Like, one of the fortunate things for us is we're not actually that advanced. A lot of this is hype. A lot of this, there may very well be a .com style bubble crash like we had in the early 2000s, just because the infrastructure and so on is being built out, and there's a lot of cool things you can do with this tool set. But like many other things, it's effectively industrializing the service sector, right? So much like how up until relatively recently in human history, agriculture was incredibly common. Before that, you had tens of thousands of years, if scientists and anthropologists are to be believed, tens of thousands of years of humans existing as pastoralists, hunter-gatherers, light agriculture as we were domesticating crops and animals, and livestock, and so on. And then that slowly transitioned to more settled societies, sometimes through fishing, like your coastal villages and stuff, and then more and more through river-based like settlements that were based on agriculture primarily. And then like 10, 15 to 20,000 years later, depending on who you ask, we're now talking about the Industrial Revolution. And every single time you've seen a pretty major shift, right, in terms of how people sustain themselves, how people live, where people primarily live, etc. And I do think that this artificial intelligence revolution, if you will, is really a continuation of what we've had with the information technology revolution that was kicked off like almost half a century ago, or roughly half a century ago now. That it itself is kind of built upon the foundations of the Industrial Revolution, and so on and so forth, right? Everything's connected to the past in some form or fashion. So I do hope that we all are able to keep kind of a clear mind about this as much as possible, because it's easy to buy into the hype. It's easy to listen to Elon Musk or Peter Thiel or any number of other people and hear about facial recognition and hear about, see how the videos look online and hear how realistic some of the voices can be and so on, and get kind of enamored with the novelty of it and actually buy into it being more than it is. Because these tech titans have a whether it's NVIDIA or Elon Musk and Grok, with SpaceX and Tesla, or whichever is involved in it, I'm actually not sure exactly how that works, etc., right? They have a vested interest in getting investors and people excited about this technology and investing in it now, not later when it's developed, or more developed, not when it's further down the road. You have to invest in it now because it's about to change the world right now, right? And it is already starting to make quite an impact, but I think we're also seeing the limits of the impact and already feeling a bit of backlash to it, as I think we should. I think there was a few years there, and we're still kind of in it. We're not really out of it yet, right? Of this kind of AI hype cycle. In fact, we're in terms of hardware costs, we're not out of it at all, because your like game consoles and computer parts and so on are just more expensive than they've ever been by a long shot, and went up rather dramatically in a short period of time. And a lot of these prices that we've seen as like what it generally costs to get a consumer level laptop or smartphone or whatever, those prices are getting hit hard, just the nature of things right now. And so that is not a joke. The impact it's having on the economy, the outsized amount of spending, that none of that is a joke. The tool sets that are being developed and the huge amount of resources that are being put into developing out these resources and then generating as much of this content based on it as possible, all of that's real. However, the limits that we're finding are that it is far from perfect and it does not replace humans, right? Not really. And yet we saw a lot of layoffs and a lot of promised productivity gains and a lot of we don't need as many people to make the same product work or to function or to look nice or whatever the case may be, depending on what their particular purview and job is. And while some of that is probably justified, and over time it will likely have even more an increasing impact over time, we're also seeing that it is still a tool set. It isn't developing on its own. It's not some self-developing learning machine structure. It is very much something that is programmed by humans and has a lot of data that is then processed and tweaked, and algorithms that are adjusted over time. That's really what it is. And then it's also often very specialized. So your like chatbot services like ChatGPT or even the modern Google search, if you use their AI system, I forget what it's, Gemini, I think. That's a different kind of AI in terms of how it's structured and what its algorithms primarily process and how they process compared to a video creator, right, etc. And so you have different applications for it, and I think that's what we're going to start seeing is it'll expand in that what we're considering this artificial intelligence, which is largely a marketing term as far as I'm aware and concerned. It needs to be specially crafted basically for what it's being set up to do. And so in that capacity, it is an advanced toolkit. It is an advancement. It represents a next step in computer science and its consumer products experience, right? However, it is not the revolution that's going to be the end all be all of everybody's job within the next handful of years either. And we'll see how quickly it develops, but kind of like automated driving in the way that like Elon Musk, for example, promised that self-driving was going to be here by the late 2010s and then again by the early 2020s and then onward and backwards it's been pushed. I think we're going to see a lot of that with AI too. That we're already seeing the limits of it in multiple facets, and you're already seeing CEOs and investors and others talk about how while it's set up to be a very transformative technology, it's over time. It's not right now. We're still working on it. And there's a lot of build out and infrastructure development that needs to be done, and then figuring out how these tools even apply and getting people trained on these tools and figuring out where are the spots that we actually can cut labor, which is unfortunate that that's how we're thinking about it, but it makes sense from a business perspective, versus areas that, this is just a tool set that makes workers more efficient, right? Which is what a lot of this is going to be. It's going to increase efficiency and productivity and is not an instant replacement for people. And that's just the reality of it. But that's not what's being sold to us by Silicon Valley and a lot of Wall Street and even politicians right now. So it's interesting to see how all of this is working. But just kind of wanted to give my thoughts on that and my understanding of it, that there's a lot of misinformation and purposely misrepresented information about this industry and about this technology. And it's good to keep a clear head about this and as good and realistic an understanding as possible about what it is that our economy and our culture is kind of walking into, and what we can expect. So maybe eventually we do get Skynet, but we're probably at least a number of years off, and we probably need at least a couple of technological shifts, like integrating AI with quantum computing or some such thing, to really see that kind of danger or something close to artificial general intelligence. Because with our current silicon-based binary computing, it's very unlikely we're going to see the kind of gains necessary, even with massive infrastructure built out, even with massive increases in electricity production and consumption and so on. It's just not going to happen anytime soon. So hope that encourages a lot of you, a lot of us, right? That it is a technology that's worth taking seriously, and it's going to be, at least unless something major changes, it's going to be a part of our reality, right? As a culture, as a people, as a nation, as a world. However, don't want people stressing or concerned more than they need to be. And as usual, if you are particularly concerned about it, especially if you're a young person, what may be good is to go into the trades, go into things that require physical, technical skill, and so on. That it will be difficult for AI to replace, and that will require some pretty solid advancements in robotics and artificial intelligence to have any chance of actually replacing this individual's job. There's already been a lot of automation that's taken a lot of people's jobs in industry and so on. There's a lot of trades where that's far more difficult to do. So, and we need them, and they're getting paid quite well right now because we have such a shortage of these types of folks. So the world is always changing, the technology is always changing, at least in our reality and how we live. But there's reason to take heart and be encouraged, and to even think that we can use this and believe that we can use this technology, like so many others, to our advantage, and see it as a tool set and not as a replacement for humans, right? Much like how agriculture has been kind of industrialized, and most people don't work in agriculture anymore, and the vast majority of humans are not hunter-gatherers, and even the vast majority of humans now don't work directly in industry, right? I think we'll continue to see this shift, and hopefully new technology and developments will continue to provide new opportunities and safety and so on for all of us, as opposed to the opposite. So anyway, thank you for hanging out with me during this most recent episode. If you want to continue hearing about culture, politics, nature of our world, please stick around because we'll be talking about it. Take care.